Guess it would help if you can see me, huh? There we go. Here we are. Hello, everybody. Hope everyone is having a great and wonderful day. Sorry, let me just fix myself up here. Okay. Great. There we go. There we go. Okay. Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday. Hope everyone is having a great and wonderful morning. Kian, it's great to see you here. Also, Soliten, great to see you here as well. And Minty, good to see you here. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Sunday. God, last night was a really great stream. We were playing Gob's Petulance, and Minty, of course, was one of the players, and just so much drama. I'm so excited to play next week, and of course to play tomorrow for Rappan Athuk as well. But in any case, so today is going to be, I think, one of the first lessons that are going to cover a lot of the skills that people, I think, want to learn, which includes the hard skills, the things that are foundational to being a great dungeon master. And this is the 4th video of the series. If you guys haven't seen the previous 3 videos, I'll put a link to the YouTube here. The last couple of videos, it started with the foundations of what are the base foundational skills that all dungeon masters should probably have. And then the very next episode, I did an example of how to create your own world using the Gygax 75 challenge. Last week, I did the Path to Mastery lesson, which is a lot of wisdom on how to learn skills and how to practice your skills and how to give yourself grace whenever things don't go so well, and how to continue forward and kind of compounding on things over time. But today is going to be the very first lesson covering the harder things. By harder, I mean the things that are going to be a lot more things like creative writing and how to write effectively and where to look for players, those sorts of things. So I guess let me go ahead and start from the start. So the specific things that I have written down to talk about today, let's see, are the how to make a really good LFG post and looking for players, tips on technical and creative writing, how to craft a dynamic story, and how to make a memorable NPC. All of those things are really important, but we'll start from the beginning with the LFG post. So I think that those of us that have played, of course, in the online space have probably looked for players at one point or another. And so places that I have looked for players before, I've looked for players on Roll20, when I used to use it for a long time, Reddit, r/LFG, r/LFG Premium for my professional games. I've also looked for players on D&D Discord. They have an LFG. Also look for players across several other Discords that also allow for self-promotion. Let's see, D&D Beyond has a place for looking for players, and so does Forge/Foundry for Foundry games. So those are all places that I've gone to look for players for my games. And and of course SPG, Start Playing Games, for my professional games as well. And so whenever it comes to looking for players in the online space, it's almost kind of an art. I was having this conversation with Chaotic and Writer last week because he was also looking for players for the Australia playtests that we're having, and we were talking about how hard it could be to look for players online sometimes. And that's not to any fault of our own. It's more so just the way that things are online. I think the one thing that I've really learned throughout all this time is that the people that are extremely great players or extremely great dungeon masters already have like a network of friends that they connect with, that they play with, and that's awesome. And so for them, they're not typically looking for other games to play with because they already have their group. And so and every now and then maybe their group will fall apart and then they'll look for another space to play with. But they tend to be very well connected people that don't have trouble looking for a place to go play. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. And so what that leaves us with is that most of the people that are looking for games in these spaces, especially Reddit and the D&D Discord, are either newer players or players that don't have anywhere else to, or they don't know anyone to go play with. And so what we're left with is kind of like a combination of hello Buildwell, good to see you here, and happy, oh by the way, happy Pride Month everyone. It's June. So yes, I'm going to be doing a Pride stream later in the month. It's called The Coven. We're going to be making the perfect wife. It's gonna be a fantastic stream. Happy Pride, yes. So yes, thank you, Minty. But anyway, in any case, so the people that tend to be in these online communities that are looking for games are people that are like either newer to the space, maybe they don't have anyone in real life that they know to play with, or maybe their friends don't play and they themselves don't DM, or maybe they're newer and so they're looking for somewhere to have their experience. I know recently, especially with Baldur's Gate 3, a lot of the people that have played Baldur's Gate 3 are like, hey, I want to try playing D&D, and then they'll go look for a space online to go have their first game, or maybe their first couple of games. And so that tends to be a lot of the online communities nowadays. And so that can make it a little difficult to find players that are exceptional or great, because I mean, I think that there's also a part of that is due to an imbalance. There's an imbalance of DMs, a number of games to players, and so it almost becomes like a chicken and the egg situation where, yeah, we want to have great players and we want to have players that are, you know, that are not going to be quote unquote problem players, as people call it, but also like they need a chance to be able to have those games. And so like if they don't get a chance to play, then they never get the skills in order to get to that point, and you know, it's so on. And so whenever it comes to these online spots, there has to be some understanding that I don't want to say that we should give up looking for what our perfect player or person that we're trying to look for, but we do need to give some space to allow players that are newer to the space to grow, and that could be hard sometimes. And so I realize that there are certain ways that I've implemented over the years to try to give people the best chance to grow into these great and exceptional players, especially if it's one of their first games. And so the thing with newer players is that they're very new and they're very moldable, and it's their first time. And so a lot of what they're going to learn going forward is going to come from the first campaign or the first couple of campaigns that they take part in. And so and I always tell people that are new to the role, it's like, hey, like, you know, find a really good dungeon master that's willing to go slow and willing to teach and willing to show the ropes in a very slow-like manner. And I do see sometimes whenever I do go looking for players, look at other people's posts, is that there are some groups that are not very friendly to that, and that is completely fine and okay. And I think it entirely depends on what it is that the goal of the game is for. And so for me, like, I try in my D&D Discord, to make games that are very, very, very new player friendly. And I do have one game with Baldur's Gate Pre that's being ran by Kay, where it's very exceptionally new player friendly. I also try to teach new players, new people how to play as well with the Let's Learn D&D series, and also, of course, people that want to learn how to dungeon master. I also make an effort to teach them as well. And so I think first off, like, in my space, there is a lot of room for people that are new to learn and to have a great experience. I think the problem that I have is that there's only one of me, and there's only so many players and so many games that I can run, especially nowadays. And so, but I do try to make time. In any case, so what exactly are the things that I've used to kind of help get really great output or outcomes from my LFG posts? And so I think the one aspect that I'm going to cover first is the one thing that's going to be a constant is the LFG post itself. And then the second thing that I'm going to cover are the things that relate to techniques or things that can be done in order to kind of tune in or key into maybe the target audience or the target player that maybe you're looking for. and that can range very widely depending if you're going to stream or if it's more of a professional game, etc. But I'll start with the one constant, which is the LFG post itself. So just me sharing. Here we go. Am I sharing now? Okay, good. I am. Okay, so I have made so many LFG posts by now. There's not really anything I have to do to prepare for this. In fact, one of the main, I mean, the thing about what I do professionally nowadays is that I write a lot. And so I didn't feel a need to prepare for today's thing. So you'll see that I'm doing this just completely woken up like 20-30 minutes ago. So let's just get right to it. And please, by all means, like, throw questions out there, ask me things. I'm very, very attuned to listening to you guys and answering any questions you have about anything that I'm doing over here, okay? So please don't feel like I can't. Definitely throw some questions my way if you have any. So with the LFG post, LFG, if you're not sure what that stands for looking for game. Other ways that people have called it is looking for game master or looking for player. But the one that tends to be used the most is LFG for both cases. If you go to the D&D Discord, they also have looking for community, which community is for like a large, more than a normal group of players. So like if you had 2 DMs or 1 DM and like 2 groups of players, that would be a community. And that's also used over on the Reddit side as well. But more often than not, whenever they say LFG, they say looking for game. And the LFG, looking for game, tends to be something that, I mean, it's really used across on both sides. But the one thing that's going to be the main indicator of which one it's going to be versus the other, it's going to be very obvious, like what it is that you're looking for. And so whenever it comes to the post itself, there is of course going to be there's the title of the LFG. There's going to be the body slash main, the main body slash description. Those are going to be your 2 main parts of your LFG. And so there are some do's and don'ts whenever it comes to these things. And each area that you post that, it's a little bit different. But the one thing about the title that is definitely very important is that you want to be very clear about what it is you're looking for, and you want to use words that have meaning that everyone will understand. For example, I run a game called Rappan Athuk. That means absolutely nothing to anyone unless they actually played what Rappan Athuk is. And so depending on who my target audience is, I have to decide if this is something that people know or not. What people know what Rappan Athuk is? Well, probably not. What people maybe know what the Fall of Vecna is, most likely because they've been advertising that thing like crazy. So maybe I would be safe in posting that, especially if it's newer and there's a lot of hype around it. Which, if you have not purchased the book, this is not a sponsorship thing, but if you have purchased the book and you are a little bit less than satisfied with it, understandable. It is a high-level adventure. There are some great videos online that I would definitely recommend to go and look at in order to see how to fix some of the problems with that. This is a complete sideways, but it is a great adventure nonetheless. So I did review it, and there were a couple of things that I'm like, okay, this could be done a bit differently. But still a very great game, and I would definitely recommend it for people, especially DMs that haven't played a higher level adventure before. It is a good adventure. It is a good adventure to learn from as a start to get into those higher level tier games. In any case, I digress. Talking about the LFG. So when it comes to the title, we're gonna want a couple of things. So it's gotta be descriptive. Descriptive with words that people understand. We don't want to use words that mean nothing, like Rappan Athuk, for example, right? And also putting the purpose in the game of the post in the description, as well as something catchy to describe the ambience or the feel of the game as well. And so I will give a great example. And so one of the games that I've had before is I ran the Indigo Isles. And so for the Indigo Isles, I would put something like grab your friends and sail the high seas, sail the high seas, join with up to 5 other friends in the Indigo Isles. So that's something that I would use on SPG. And the reason for that is on SPG, it's understood that if you're posting on there, you're a dungeon master. So I don't have to necessarily differentiate that I'm looking for a player or a DM. And having a catchy title, like, okay, you can already tell that this probably has something to do with being a pirate. It's a pirate adventure and has the word Isles in it. Indigo Isles might not mean anything to a lot of people, but also, you know, it shows that I'm looking for about 6 people, right? Join with up to 5 others, so 1 + 5, 6. But if I didn't want this last part, I could also have put on SPG, grab your friends and sail the high seas. Let's see. Early bird discount. I could also have put like a community tag, or an identity tag, which is whenever you associate yourself with a group of people. So like LGBTQ plus friendly, or like new player friendly. That is also another tag that people tend to use, especially on Reddit and SPG. Because as I said before, a lot of LFGs are going to be either looking for new players or not. And so if you are a new player friendly game, then definitely advertise that, put that in your post, because then you'll attract a lot more attention, especially of the newer players that are looking for a spot to learn and grow. Especially in the last year or two with Baldur's Gate 3, I've seen and heard from players that it is a lot harder than before now than to find a game to go into. I think that's just the hype of the Baldur's Gate 3 pushing a lot more people into the space. Nothing wrong with that at all. But it would be nice to see a lot more of these newer players also going into the DM space, which is why I'm going to be doing a lot more effort in the next couple of months to kind of, make it more available for people to learn how to DM. And so you'll start seeing that, especially starting July. If you're not aware, so I am starting the mini marathons up again. So on June 22nd at 12 p.m., 1 p.m. EST, I'm going to be running 1 or 2 sessions, so at least 8 hours, playing Rappan Athuk back to back, in the same way that we would do for a marathon. And so the whole purpose of that is that I am basically getting people onboarded for the marathon next year, getting a bigger group of players, and also DMs, and also players that want to learn how to DM so that I can teach them in time for the marathon next year so we can break the world record again. And so it's a lot of fun. If you are not a part of the Discord and you are interested in something like that, I can put my Discord there. You can join. By all means, come and join, and then we can talk about what it is that we have to do so that we can get you onto the schedule and on your way to being a part of the marathon. It's gonna be a lot of fun. I digress. Okay, so with my title here on SPG, I probably would put something a little bit more catchy, and also talking about maybe some identity tags. If I was to post on Reddit's r/LFG has some more. Anywhere that you post, please look at their guidelines for posting, especially if you're posting across different Discords. I've found that not every place, but there are some places that are a little bit more picky than others. Like, how frequently can you post? What is the post format? what is it that you can and can't do, so that way you don't accidentally get yourself muted out of a certain community, just for not knowing what their rules are. So do be mindful of wherever you post that you are looking at their guidelines and trying to abide by them by best that you can. The one thing that I know about Reddit, especially being there so frequently, is that they always use tags in their titles, and so you got to put them in brackets of what system it is that you're using, whether it's going to be online or in person, and also what system it is. So at the very least, you'll have 5e and online probably if you're playing D&D 5e. Typically put at the beginning. You can't put them at the end, but they're typically at the beginning. And the one thing that I do know for sure about I'm not sure it's gonna let me because of the markdown format that Obsidian gets. Well, I'm just gonna use bracket. I'm just gonna use parentheses then. Pretend they're brackets. Okay. And with Reddit, layman's terms tends to work a lot better on Reddit. You can make the flashy, like, hey, grab your friend is still on a high seas. But more often than not, people just want to get to the point on Reddit. And so the attention is very short-lived on there. And so if you are very simple as like looking, let's see, new game, looking for 4 players for pirate adventure, that will actually get you a lot more views than the one that I put for SPG. Surprisingly enough, it's just something about the less commercialized and the less professional it sounds, the more it actually tends to attract people in on Reddit. It's just the thing. This is how Reddit is. Those of us that are on Reddit, we know it's a very unique and great community, and I do love the Redditors a lot. But we definitely have a very unique niche and nuance how we like our things read. So if you try to post something like I did up here on the SPG, you're most likely going to be a lot more ignored. But if you put something just very layman's, like new game looking for players for pirate adventure, and then I did put like the tags in there, U plus, LGBTQ plus, and be player friendly, then you're probably going to get even more attention. It's because, like I said before, a lot of the new players will be either on Reddit or D&D Discord looking for games. There's also a lot of LGBT as well on Reddit, so if you're looking for LGBT, great, that's a great place to go as well, although we're everywhere now. So but that is definitely things that will kind of help get your post looked at a lot more, is having a title that works for the place that you are posting it. Now if you're posting on Discord, depending on the Discord, some Discords do it and some Discords don't allow this markup format. If you don't know what markup format is, if you've been kind of like watching me type, it's when I put a hashtag and I put a hashtag and then I start writing, and it changes how big the size of the font is. The things about Discord that'll make your LFGs pop, especially for a title, is one, a combination of markup and emojis. And so if you are using them in tandem together and you are putting a lot of work into them, then you'll get some really nice looking LFGs. And so let me just grab a copy. I save my LFGs on a OneNote so I can show you more or less what it is that I kind of put. Let me see. Looking for player, here we go. So I'm just gonna copy and paste this in. I don't know if it's going to put in the emojis because some of these are custom just for Discord, but okay. So just copy and pasted it in straight from my OneNote and about me, and then I have stuff about myself. Definitely the quoting. Oh, this is where a lot of the emojis would have been, but you can kind of see that there is a format that I use that helps with separating out what different levels of what to look for. And so definitely what you don't want to do is, let's say that I didn't have any of this markup, and so if I had no markup, then it would just look like a block of text. People typically can't handle looking at blocks of text whenever it comes to the body. And so like this is very hard to look at if I just made it only a block of text. But if it was something a little bit more spaced out with smaller paragraphs and smaller sentences, then this is going to be a lot better. Even though all I did was add spaces and just indent stuff, it is going to be received a lot more. I mean, it's going to be received a lot better by the people reading it than if you just had it all back to back to back to back to back. So let's talk about the body paragraph itself. So I guess let me finish with the Discord. So when it comes to Discord, you want to use emojis and markup. Okay. So let's talk about the description of what it is put in your LFG. So things to put is like yes, yes, yes to put, right? Like no, don't put. So we definitely do want our LFGs to be as concise and straight to the point as possible. Okay, so we want them to be short. We want them to be shorter. We do want them to communicate effectively. Ooh, music is going real hard. Sec. Okay, so we do want the LFGs to be shorter. We do want them to be descriptive. We don't. Then alternatively, we don't want them to be long. No blocks of text. And we do want to separate out the different fields of what it is that people are looking for. And so having like main categories of information. Let's see, typically visually separated from each other. And I'll talk a little bit more, show you how exactly to do that. We also want to include things about our games that people are going to want to know, right? And so I'm going to say details about the game that people want to know. For example, when is it? How often are we playing? How many players are there? How many players are already in it? What kind of classes do they play? Is it streamed? Are we playing online? Are we playing on Foundry? Is it Roll20? There's so many things that we can put. And so those are the things that we want to kind of focus on a lot. And whenever it comes to about the campaign, you have to be really careful with this. So I have seen people that have put pages and pages and pages and pages of lore. No one is going to read that. And so rather than putting pages of lore, make a very narratively description of what it is that your campaign is about. Typically, the ones that are received best are the ones that are kind of like if you were to read on the back of a book that are showing like a bit of a scene or talking about a character or something that's going on in third person or maybe even first person as well. But nonetheless, the ones that get received best are the ones that are going to be very narrative, have a bit of action in them, and they give a good feeling for what it is that your game is about. So let me go back to my descriptions over here. All right, so let's say that I was going to make one for Rappan Athuk, right? So if I'm going to be making an LFG off of Rappan Athuk, I'm going to start putting my different categories of what it is that I am writing about. And so the first thing is going to be like an intro. And then I would also put about the game. About the game, yep. And how to sign up. Right, very easy. And so in my introduction, I would have a intro to the game, right? Maybe intro to who I am. If I want to give a little bit of description of who it is that I am, and so people get a feel for who it is that I am as a dungeon master. In the about the game, this is where I would start writing things about like player spots available. I would also put things like requirements, and I would also put things like how we play, and that's about that tends to be about it. I mean, I guess also like when we play slash frequency, right? If it's a professional game, probably like cost if professional. How to sign up? Maybe you want them to contact you on Discord, or to turn in an intake form. Be careful about the intake form. There are some places that don't allow that. D&D Discord does not like you posting personal information, even in intake form, and so be careful about that. And also, just other Discords also don't like that as well. So you might have to have people contact you directly. Reddit is half and half on it. Sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not. There's not really much consistency with it. So I would just be on the safer side and just have people message you on Discord and then send them the intake form after that. We'll talk about intake forms in a bit of why that's so an important thing to have. But this is going to be most likely your main layout of what you're going to have. And so to fill this in, let's start writing about the intro to the game. So I'm just going to copy paste this. So in my intro for Rappan Athuk, I would probably put something that is very narrative, and it could take you a couple of rewrites. But if I was to write about Rappan Athuk, the one thing about Rappan Athuk, especially in my games, is to put a lot of focus on how dangerous of a location it is. I would also want to give the feeling of challenge, like, hey, if you sign up for this game, your character is going to be challenged, and also a bit of the grim darkness of the setting. So I would probably write something like stepping out of the tomb, stepping out of the mausoleum into the open space once again. You look behind you and see no one else has made it out. As the gargoyles on top of the church animate, you continue to run despite your injuries. The traveling merchants were right. Don't go down the well. As you succumb to your injuries, you wonder if anyone will be able to stop Orcus. And that in and of itself says a lot of my story. For one, me putting it in a narrative prose really is gonna put a lot of emphasis on what it is the feel is, right? Like, it's almost as if players are brought into the story, especially when you use words like you or I, because then the people are looking at that and they're applying that to themselves. And so it kind of like forms an attachment from them to the description of what it is that the game is about. And that's good. You want people to kind of get that attachment and to get a bit of interest of what it is that's going on here. There's a bit of mystery, there's a bit of danger, there is some warning. It also talks about Orcus, and a lot of people know about Orcus. There are some pros and cons to writing in this way. The pros is that if you're gonna have a very narrative, a very roleplay descriptive thing, this is gonna be great for you. The cons is that you can end up writing a narrative prose and end up confusing people if you're not careful, because the one thing about this is that, yes, it is really nice to have narration. It is really good to have this introduction to what the game is, but it doesn't tell me much of what it is that I'm looking for, right? It gives an introduction to the world, but this in and of itself is not enough. And so what I would do, what I do is often if I have something like this, is that in the next paragraph, I would also give it a much more layman's description to the game. So I might say, Rappan Athuk. Rappan Athuk is a mega dungeon. Is a mega dungeon sandbox adventure, written by Frog God Games. If you are looking for a game that will challenge you and push your character to their limits while enjoying a heavy roleplay experience in a grim, dark world, this is for you. This game is for you. And so between the combination of both, you start to see that in just a very short amount of space, I've already said a lot about the game. I've already given a example of what it is to expect without actually showing them a video, you know, just in those few sentences at the beginning. Plus, I was very forward in what it is that the game is about. And then if I want to here then write about myself, I can then put the description of myself in there on who it is that I am. So I might do something like this. Now, as I was saying before, Markdown helps out a lot. So if I start using Markdown, it starts to separate out the spaces a bit better, like so. So that way, whenever the eye is following down along, they can see that they can jump very quickly to the next spot. So if I just want to skip the intro, I can very quickly skip the intro and go to the next portion just by following the line down. As opposed to if I didn't, this is going to be a lot harder to follow. Even though you can see the separation between the two paragraphs, without the markdown, it becomes harder for people's eye to naturally just skip to the next one. So I use Markdown to kind of help people get past it than if it wasn't there. There. So this is a lot easier to follow. Okay, so my about me is here. I can have an intro to the game. I can have this be an entire section altogether. We're talking about myself. Oh, come on. Boop, boop. Okay, it's being mean to me. There we go. My name is Paladin. I'm just gonna quickly create this. Bam. Okay. So already I have my intro at the beginning, I have my about me. I will say that if there are a lot of things that you're gonna write, I could have done my about me in two ways. I could have made a long single paragraph, but people don't tend to do well with very long paragraphs. Even this one right here is questionably a bit too long, but it's easier to write everything in simpler, almost like a list format, and then just have people read through it, as opposed to seeing one giant block of text and be like, ooh, I don't know if I want to read that. And so the whole point of this is to try to increase the chances that people are going to read the things that you want to put in front of them. And so making it easier, and also the word choice that is being used as well is a big difference. Most people, especially in America, they read at a 5th grade reading level. And so if you're ever wondering like, I wonder if this is a paragraph or sentence that might be too complicated, you can put your paragraph through ChatGPT or Grammarly and have it rewrite your sentences to be a bit simpler. And that actually will get you a lot more attention than if you have these really narrative prose that have all this complicated language, because a lot of people don't comprehend that kind of writing style as well. It's just how things are, you know. I wish that they were, but unfortunately, if you do write in that narrative prose with that high language, people in the TTRPG space do tend to have a better comprehension for those kind of things because, hey, we are nerds. We all play these games that require textbooks to read and have books upon books of fantastical language in the fictional side, and so you probably will be okay even if you did, but you would probably do a little better off still just simplifying it just a little bit. And so if you were writing at the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade reading level, you might be okay. But simplifying it down just a little bit would still help, and help a lot more people grab onto the attention of what it is you're trying to basically advertise for your game to get them to join and apply. So simpler and shorter is better. All right, so let's continue to about the game. Okay. So when I say about the game, it's different than I'm talking about intro to the game. So these are going to be, I could also call it game details as well. That's another way to call it. We'll call it that, game details. And so these are going to be the small things revolving around what it is that my game is about, and also how the game is expected to be played. And so if you don't have these things in your description, typically the first couple of questions you're going to get from people that are playing is like, hey, how many players are there? This and that. And so rather than having people constantly ask you these things, it's better to just upfront this information, and you save yourself a lot of time. And also people will be more likely to apply, at least the people that you want to apply to your game, if they know that information upfront. You also, I mean, just the fact that you save yourself a lot of time, you also filter out, players tend to filter out the games that do and don't want to play based on these details, which tend to be very crucial. And so, for example, I am gonna say that, hey, I have 3 out of 6 seats available. Right, half of my seats are free. Seats, players, spots, all those words work. People, I use the word seats. I realized that you also can use the word players. For me, it's just a preference of using seats. I don't know, or haven't seen enough evidence to say that one is better than the other, but I think it's understood, hopefully it's well understood, that hey, I'm looking for players. Now this is how many spots there are available. So 3 out of 6 seats available. Requirements. All right, I'm gonna put that one closer to the end, maybe even on its own. And the reason why is that people might be looking to see, like, how can I to see what it is that, if I even can join this game. And so a lot of people do put requirements of what it is to join. For example, one of mine that is very prevalent across all of them is that I play with people that are 18 years older, and so that would be something great to know. Right, as a requirement, like, hey, you gotta be at least 18 to play. All right, and so, but other game details that we have is how we play. And so how we play is, it could be many things. It could be like where we are playing. So we're playing online, right? We're playing online, we're playing on Discord. Maybe we're streaming, right? So maybe we're streaming on Twitch. If you're not streaming on Twitch, I wouldn't put it in there. Streaming on Twitch, are we using, is it play by post? Like, play by post is whenever you're writing messages towards each other and role playing in that way rather than talking over voice? Or is it like voice, right? Like a voice call? Or maybe, am I also requiring video? Is it voice and video? In which case, I will probably talk about that a little bit more in my requirements. But I might also say, if you're okay with VTubers, you might say VTubers, okay? Great. And let's see, what else? I would also put things like roleplay heavy, right? Instead of saying roleplay heavy, I could also say, you can also use percentages like 75% roleplay, 25% combat. I could say that it's maybe like new player friendly. And that is about the extent of what I would start putting for information. So if you start realizing in your how we play that there is a lot of tech, you also can separate the tech out, like tech used, and then I can put Foundry, Discord, Twitch on here. Twitch camera, and then in that way, YouTuber's okay. I have now created another category, and I made this a lot simpler to look at. And so the reason why that's important, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. You want your different points to be as short as possible, because the moment you start making them a little bit too long, longer than 2 lines, less likely that they're going to be looked at, they're going to be overlooked, and then people will be a little bit, or you might get a little confused, like, oh, I thought I put that on my post. Well, it's not so much that, it's just that people have a harder time looking at things that are longer than 2 lines, and so you have to try to make it easy for them and make it easy for yourself as a result. And so I'm going to delete a lot of these that I've put down there. Streaming on Twitch, voice. Yep, I mean, okay. Hey, Cave Bender. Hope you're having a great one. I'm currently talking about how to make a great LFG post, talking about the nuances of it. But already you can kind of see here. Hope you're having a great day, Cave Bender. It's great to see you here. It's been forever. Cave Bender and I go way back. We're basically besties at this point. Okay, so we talked about seats available, how we play, tech used. Amen. Thank you. Now, player spots. So this might be a way to kind of help break it up, so that way people kind of see categorically where things are at. And what I like to do is that I like to have my my sentences start all along the same line. And the reason for that, design wise, you want to have players' eyes go down very easily to find the information that they need. Whenever you have, and this is kind of a design, I think a theory that I'm talking about right now, whenever your eye kind of goes like this across information that you're looking for, or pictures, it tends to just really lose interest very, very quickly, because you now have a lot of stimulus you're having to filter through to understand. So if you help the people by separating your sentences out like this, where you have, of course, the category on the left, start of your sentences on your right, it's a lot easier to look at than if it was the other way, where it was all squished together. And so that is one tip that one thing you can use to make your LFGs better. And so kind of continuing on with the same trend, time/frequency is the next category. Okay, so I'm going to say that we play on Fridays, weekly, 8 p.m. EST, right? So here's one thing that'll definitely help out immensely as well. If you're planning to post this on Discord, use the Discord timestamp, because it'll post it in everybody's time zone. If you're not sure what the Discord timestamp is, very easily you can timestamp. I'll put a link here, save it. This is a great tool so that you can post things in other people's time zones. It helps save with a lot of communication. If you're not posting on Discord and you're posting on Reddit, so if you want to try to target as many people as possible to look at your post, right? And so something that I do is that no matter what time it is, I will post a secondary time for UTC. And that will allow people in the EU side of the world, or the across the pond, to look at it and be like, is this a game that I can participate in? If you are playing at this is a tip, if you are playing at a time that is very late, and I mean like after 7 p.m., 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, post it in the Australian time as well, because a lot of players over there, they can play 13 hours after you have that time post, and so you're very likely to get really awesome Australian accents to play in your game, and that's something that's helped me. And so I If it's something that is like maybe in the middle of the day, like 11 EST or 12 PM, I'll post all three because I might get people from all three, and that has happened before, especially when advertising for marathons, where I did get people from the America, the from Europe and Australia, just because I did that extra effort of posting it in a time that makes sense for them to look at. And so that's how you can try to get a bigger net of people to look at your one post with very little effort. And then, you know, you just post the time for UTC. I believe the time for Australia, just going off of memory, is UTC plus 12. Don't quote me on that. I'm very sure that that's what it might be. I'm pretty bad at geography, so I have to look that one up frequently. But, and nonetheless, posting these extra little times for those parts of the world will help them a lot more to see if this is a game that they can partake in, and you get extra players with really good with accents, and that makes character roleplay a lot of fun. If Cave Bender, if you're still here, I love Cave Bender's accent. I'm not going to say where he's from, but it is amazingly beautiful. I love it every single time I hear it. I'm like, ah, yes, this is what a dwarf should sound like. Okay, so those are the main details that you're going to want to put. I did put the cost in there. If you are someone like me that does this professionally, you could put a cost of like, is it like money per session? Maybe you have like an early bird, you have like any sort of discounts, right? Those are the kind of things you're going to want to put there. But because this is kind of geared more towards the not professional space, I won't really go into that too heavily. So if that applies to you, sorry. But I think that as far as game details go, this is pretty much the niche of what we're going to be using in our LFG. Does anyone else post something differently? If you guys are out there, how does this compare to what it is that you're using in your games? Just curious. I've seen people do things for, you know, in a different order for different reasons. I see people put the about me first and then the intro to the game, or maybe they put different things in their intro. Whatever it is, you know, if you're here, let me know. This is what I've used consistently just to communicate things very effectively of what it is that I'm looking for. But continuing on, so requirements. I think that requirements get a little bit of a bad rap. Some people say, hey, I don't think it's great to put a lot of barriers for people to join. It's like, okay, that's fair enough, but like if you are looking for something specific or a specific type of game, then you know it probably would do well that you're very, very, very forward and honest about what it is that you do and don't want as far as a game experience. And so and I don't think that there's anything wrong with being honest on your requirements of what it is that they might be. I think that the things that do get a bad rap are discriminatory requirements. And so what I mean is, hey, I'm only looking for Gen X, or I don't want Gen Z. Those are I've seen those. Those don't do very well, and it's probably a lot better to maybe talk about the things that you are looking for or not looking for in those generational gaps. And so I'll give a great example of something I saw the other day. And so I saw on Reddit that there was a guy, he posted about his game, and he was very specific about not having Gen Z. And when I looked in the comments to just kind of see like what it is that was going on, it turns out that the things that he really didn't like and that he did like is that he really liked the Lord of the Rings kind of setting, very traditional fantasy with the elves and the dwarves and all that. But he did not like having animal characters in his game. And so his bias was that people that are Gen Z have a lot of furry characters and that they're not interested in this very deep roleplay. And so it's like, okay, well, maybe some are, right? I don't think that we can generalize everybody to be one thing or the other. So rather than saying, hey, no Gen Z, maybe put in your requirements is like, hey, like this is gonna have be okay with really heavy roleplay, right? Maybe in the how we play up here, I might put traditional fantasy. right? And so there's these things that you can put in there without directly targeting a group of people, and so we just have to think about it through the frame, like what is it that I mean when I say I don't want this or I don't want that, and try to word them in a way that's a little bit more fair. And I think that will come across a lot better rather than saying, hey, I don't want Gen Z, because that is a completely different mindset that I won't get into, that I don't agree with, and I don't support that at all. But if you are looking for a traditional game that does not have characters, probably find a better way to word it rather than saying no Gen Z. So in my requirements, I would probably say, hey, being okay with really heavy roleplay. That's great. Let's see, characters. I might put like characters, if there are limitations for character creation, I might put that up here, more for game details, right? If I did have any sort of limitations, characters, if limitations, right? Or I might even put the level up here if you want to put level, like level so and so. Maybe what might be starting level 1, etc. But other requirements that I would put is, for me, I probably would put something, well, because I stream, I would be putting like camera for streaming, VTuber friendly, VTuber okay, no, VTuber okay, 2D or 3D. I wouldn't call that heavy roleplay. I would call it goofy roleplay. Yeah, you know, goofy roleplay, I feel like in every game, you can't really escape that. I think every game is gonna have its upsides and its downs. It's D&D. This is how it happens. Everyone's gonna laugh at something. But if a game is entirely just absurd with no story, I guess that's a different vibe. I will say that a couple of my games are just meant to be just beer and pretzel, throw it at the wall kind of games, and those are really cool. Those can be cool. Can you do those for a long campaign? Maybe, maybe not. I guess it really depends on who it is you're doing it for, right? Like if you're wanting to have a lot of really in-depth story, then you might have to kind of cut it back on the goofy just a little bit. But can you have goofy and story? Yes, I do that a lot in my games. But you can't have heavy roleplay and goofy roleplay both at the same time. So whatever it is, just being able to communicate that effectively is, I think, just the key part of whatever it is that you're putting on your LFG post. So but anyway, but yeah, that's a good comment there. Touched up evil. So other requirements: camera for streaming, VTuber okay, 2D or 3D model only. And I say that because PNG tubers, I'm not saying that they're bad or anything, but I think that a face that kind of moves around a little bit tends to be a bit better received. Now, are there games out there that use PNG tubers that are amazing, get a lot of views? Absolutely. It's just a preference for me that I like to see the faces move, and so it helps me kind of communicate a bit better with them. And so that's more of a preference for me. It's not a preference for quality at all. But other things that I would put for requirements here is, of course, a computer that can handle Foundry. That is a huge one. I have had people. Also, thanks for donating to the milk challenge, Cape Bender. I have had players that never played on Foundry before, and they're like, hey, I don't know if my computer can handle Foundry. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, in my intake form process, I have a capability for them to look at a playground. And so playground is something that I set up so that way people can test their systems to see if they can or can't handle Foundry. And, you know, and fair enough, like I have over time have had people that had problems with their computer, such as graphical errors that needed their drivers updated. And all of those things are really good to know ahead of time, because if the first time that they are looking to see if their computer is compatible is whenever they come to play, it's going to be very hard to help them with their computer problems if it's then and there at the start of the session, as opposed to way beforehand. So I do make it a requirement to know that for my games, only because whenever Foundry breaks, I do know it takes a long time. But if you're playing on Roll20, you're probably not going to be having this there at all, because a lot of people can handle Roll20 because it's more of a RAM based system rather than a graphical one. So, but I think seems at least 8 gigabytes of RAM, at least on the descriptions. Yeah. Foundry uses a little bit of RAM and a lot of video card. And there is also like internet connection is also something that is a thing as well. So not as problematic if it's hosted somewhere on Forge, but if it's on my computer as the host, I might have to invest a lot more into upload and download, which thankfully I do have a good upload and download, so not worried about that. But yes, there are requirements for Foundry on their website. I used to throw those out at people to be like, hey, you need all of these things, and it would overwhelm people. So because it looks very technical, very graphical, and whenever people don't understand what those things mean, they're like, ooh, I don't know what that is, maybe this isn't for me, and then they'll skip by the post. So which is not really that helpful. But if you make it possible for them to test it, their computers most likely will handle it. A lot of computers, especially if it's like a more recently made computer, tend to have graphics cards in them that can handle it with enough RAM. Older computers and Macs and Linux, questionable if it can handle it, especially the Macs and the Apple computers. Some can and some can't. I've seen both, especially in the last 2 years with Apple products, where they just either great or not great. So definitely testing beforehand is really good. So I think that's it for requirements. Okay. So how to sign up. All right, so this is a part that is very important. I also at times might also include it up at the top as well. I have put it here, and I've put it in 2 places before. If this is all they need to read as the intro and then apply, great. If not, most times I put it at the end. And so I make it very, very simple. I say contact me on Discord and then I'll put my Discord handle. I don't mind putting it on there. You can very easily find it. It's Dungeon Master Paladin. Add me as a friend if you like. Sure. So contact me on Discord at Dungeon Master Paladin, and then I'll say what the next steps are. I will send an intake form. We will make time to meet up over a video call to talk about the game and answer questions. Wait, talk about the game, answer questions, and get to know each other. All right. So let me recap what it is that I've done so far, especially if you're now coming in the middle of the stream. I guess I could just reintroduce myself as well. I'm Paladin. It's Paladin's Archives. I'm teaching how to do some of the foundational hard skills that Dungeon Masters need in order to improve their games and save themselves a lot of time and get themselves to the next level. And so the first thing that I've been talking about so far is the looking for game post. Whenever you're looking for players online, how to advertise yourself, how to advertise your games so that you can maximize the amount of players that you are looking for your game. Saves you time, saves them time, you get the players that you want, everyone's happy, right? And so I was talking about different places that we can post, such as the D&D Discord server. There is Reddit r/LFG. There's also Reddit r/LFG Europe as well, and LFG Premium. This is all Reddit. There is also Roll20. If you're using Roll20, definitely use the Roll20 spaces for their advertising. There's also Foundry/Forge. So there's one for each system, for each BTT. And there's also D&D Beyond as well, that you can post your games as well. And various Discords have their own place that you can promote and look for players and games. Do be mindful to look at their requirements of what it is that they do and don't allow for posting, especially things like frequency, links, etc. Just be very mindful to be respectful and of the things that they do and don't allow. Otherwise, you're gonna find yourself in hot water very quickly. So there are two main things that come that the LFGs are based on: the title and the description of the LFG. When we talk about the title has to be descriptive, short. It has to say what it is that your game is about, what it is that you're looking for. Depending on where you are posting, if it's a professional one made on SPG, it's going to look very different than one put on Reddit. The ones on Reddit like to be very short, to the point, more layman, whereas the one on SPG likes to have a little bit more of that narrative flair in the posting itself. So no, in terms of the body, the main body, there are several categories you're going to want to separate your information in, and it is very good to try to be as short as you can about these various things, with exception to the intro to the game, where you can have a narrative description for what it is your game is about. You can think about it as if you were reading the back of a book, as it mentions a paragraph that shows the action or the feel for what it is your game is about, followed by a short paragraph of what it is that your game is about in layman's terms, such as I have done here. A section about yourself is optional, but it does give people a better feel for who you are. Maybe you can talk about your experience, the things that you really, really love. Giving people a bit of your personality is going to have a higher rate of people being interested in your games, because they get a feel or a little bit of a taste of who it is that you are as a person, what it is that you offer. And those things are very valuable to players. So the next thing down is then details, talking about how many player spots there are, how you play, the tech that you use for your games, how frequently you're playing, what day of the week, what information do you have for characters and character creation. Those are the kind of things that you want to have for game details. And in all of these different main sections that we're talking about, you also want to frame these and design the text to be put in a way that's going to make it very visually appealing and easy to follow. And so you'll see that I have my blocks of text connected together by a line right here. That's called a quoted line. And then of course here again the same thing. My game details are all done with what's it called, bullet points. And then the second half, because there's all of that chaotic information, I have them separated and marked down a line, so it's very easy to follow from one side to the other. And then the rest it follows a very similar format. And so we want to be sure, just some quick tips, again, quick and to the point. Separate out your paragraphs and your different major categories and make them easy to follow, so that way people have an easier time. And also be very honest, be very forward about what you're looking for, but being respectful as well about what it is that you're putting them in them. So that's all I have for the LFG post. So hopefully that is some good information to help some of you. If anyone has any questions about the LFG post before I move on to the next part of the LFG post, which is intake forms and meeting with someone, which are two very, very important things for looking for players, then please take time to ask it meow before I move on. You know, it can be a lot of work. Every single time that I go into do an LFG, I always go in with the mind of like, how can I improve this so that people have a higher chance of being interested in this game, and also so I can get the people that I'm targeting to be a part of this game as well. And that could be very, very, very difficult to do, but even just micro improvements are gonna be much better over a longer time horizon for your skills and for the post itself than if you had not done those improvements. And so, and this kind of goes back to what I was talking about last week, that the path to mastery is a lot of 1% improvements over a long period of time. And so if you go into every part of D&D or DMing with the mindset of like, how can I improve this even just a little bit, just do it just a little bit here, a little bit there, and then seeing the effective result over a long period of time, you're gonna get a lot really, really, really fast. So 1% increases over time really do compound. But okay, I see no one's got questions or anything, so I will move on then. All right, let's talk about the intake forms. Yay! Why are these important? What are they? So, and then meeting with players. So, what are intake forms exactly? I am going to pull up my intake form here on the side so I can show it. So, one of the things that I have realized over time is that whenever I have posted in the past, it takes a lot of time to meet up with people, ask questions, answer their questions, and ultimately to end up that, oh, they can't play because their computer can't handle Foundry, or they realize that it's on a day that they can't play a little bit too late, and so, or maybe everything was fine, but then they ghosted and never showed up, and that's happened several times too. So how is it that we can save ourselves some of that time, save them some of the time as well, so that way we can get the, again, it's all about maximal output, so that communication is done effectively. Anything that you see that you are repeating over and over and over and over and over and over is something that you probably want to put on an automated process, and this is what I mean by intake forms. And so intake forms are something that I create on Google Forms as a way to kind of give the more in-depth information than what I got here. All right, so this will tell me a lot about the game. The intake form will tell me a little bit more about the game as a player, but also me as a GM, I can also get a little bit more information about the player as well without me having to talk to that person directly. And so I will give an example of my intake form that I have, that I make. So I will pull it up here, Paladin's intake form. So I put a lot of effort so that way others can learn a lot about me without me having to talk about myself too much, because there's a lot of things that I do, especially as a professional, but even you as a GM, even if you're not a professional, this is something that will save you a lot of time. It'll make it a lot easier for you to manage a lot of interest, and also filtering in the interest that maybe would or would not be as much of a fit for your game. And this goes for both sides, right? It's as much a decision for them as it is for you, whether your game and your group is the right fit for them, and vice versa. But in my intake form, I give a little bit more of a description of who I am. If you are able to put a picture of yourself with your face, faces are things that people look at very intensely, and our brains love faces. Especially very attractive faces, and I'm very handsome myself. So if you could put a picture of yourself on your intake form, great. You know, people are gonna be even that more interested, and they'll be having a bit more of a connection with you, even without having talked to you directly or heard you talk before. And so that's something that, you know, that could help with getting more interest. Write about yourself, right? Write about what it is that you're interested in, what it is that you're passionate about, what it is that you're good at, because those things are really going to come across to others, right? Like, what is it that makes you so great at being a dungeon master? What is it that you love about D&D? What is the best session that you ever had? What character or what aspect of D&D is it that you thoroughly enjoy more than anything? Those are things you want to include in your About Me, as well as maybe some like information like how long have you been DMing? What is it that people can expect from your games? If you have links to, or if you do anything like Twitch streaming or a YouTube channel, you could put links in your About Me, which is what I do here. I have links to just about everything that I do, including my SPG profile, my book that I've written, to the Discord, Twitch. All of those things are great because sometimes people are like, oh, I want to know more about this dungeon master to see if maybe, you know, there's someone that I would vibe with. There's some people that feel a lot more comfortable with others if they thoroughly look up their background. Maybe they have there are some people that are a little bit more anxious about finding newer games, or maybe they had a bad experience, and so they feel more comfortable with someone that they get to know a lot more, especially beforehand, because they want to avoid having a repeat of a bad game before. And understandable. I've heard some pretty bad horror stories out there for dungeon masters and players both, of games that just didn't go very well. And so if you can make it easier for people to connect with you by including some of this information about yourself, then you're just making it easier for them, and you're making it easier for you, and you might get a really great player, because some of these people that are a little bit more cautious, they're not necessarily great or bad. I mean, players in of themselves for it, but they just might have had a bad experience. They just are wanting to have a little bit more security that their next game is going to be good, especially if they are a newer player. I have seen some players that had a really bad experience and they never played ever again. And that's really sad here, but it is a thing that happens. And I have seen some players that are newer that had a bad experience are hopeful, and they are very careful then going forward because of this thing that happened with another game. So whatever you can do to make it easier for people to trust you, to show who you are, then you're just going to make it that much better for everybody in general, but especially for people that are maybe a little bit more cautious. And if you are a person that is definitely more on the new player friendly side, this is something that I would definitely 100% recommend, to add a lot of personality on who you are and what it is that people can expect from you. So that is what I include on my intake form, just from the very get-go, stuff about me. And so I also ask questions about them, like how old are they, right? And so then I have different age groups. Very important for me as a professional, because there are some consistent variations between different age groups in regards to what it is their expectations are from D&D. Someone that is between the ages 18 and 30, I'm probably going to have a player that is going to be a lot more roleplay intensive. They're going to want a lot more of a story-driven game. They're going to want to be less focused on the nitty-gritty stuff and less reading. They tend to read a little bit less, and be a lot more intensive on feeling and ambience more than anything else. And artistry as well. Someone that is maybe more along the ages of 30, 40, 45, we're kind of getting into the area of having a little bit more complexity to games. And so we're going to add a lot more of an in-depth reality to these kind of games. Also, there's going to be a little bit higher of a combat focus, and it's going to be a little bit more evenly split. So we kind of have like a half roleplay, half combat kind of game. We also can expect there to be a lot more, how can I put it? There's going to be a shift in the amount of complexity and depth that is required to kind of satisfy this generation, only because they have a lot more life experience, right? And so the things that are going to hit them more are going to be things that are more relative to that generation, of things like they had problems they had growing up. That is applied to any and every generation as well. Even older than that, 41 to 60, we start getting into the realm of like 3.5, 2E, 1E, and games back then were a lot more nitty gritty. There were a lot of details. There was a lot more war of attrition between between the player side and the GM side, only because there was so much you could do, right? Like with Thaco and the dungeons, the way they were built, the old school, kick in the door, go through the dungeon, have another fight, get some loot, repeat, rinse and repeat. That is very different than the way that things are nowadays. And all these playstyles are completely valid in and of themselves. But me, like, if I see that I'm running this very goofy, loose, silly game about animals, and probably going to get a lot of forms that are between the ages 18 and 30. But if I have a very dark, gritty, this is old school, we're going to be playing with variant mechanics to make it as hard as possible, I'm going to see a lot more of the ages 31 to 50 on that one. And I have seen that consistently. And with my Rappan at the game on Monday that I have, it's kind of this weird mix of silly and serious and mechanics. And so I tend to get a lot of people between the ages 23 and 35 for that one. And so why does it matter? You know, why does age and these consistencies matters? Because you want to be very attuned to who your target audience is, who your target player is, because the more you can understand your game and the type of people that would be best for your game, the better you can position what it is you're trying to make, so that you can target those people for the game that you want to lead it. And you could do it in a way that's very natural, so that it'll naturally attract people rather than exclusives. You're not necessarily saying no to other people to apply, but instead you're just framing the information in a way that's going to make it very, very, very easy for the people that are going to be best suited for the game that you're trying to make. So that's why age is important. And now, I would say the thing with age that I look at is I just look at trends. So if I am making a game that I know is extremely difficult and have all these different variations in it, I'm going to look at the trends of what age group is it that is most often applying to my game, and also where are they applying from, right? And so are most of these people from Reddit? Are most of these people from D&D Discord? Are most of these people from here or there? Because that'll tell you a lot about who the type of people that, or the group of people that would be best suited for your game, and also where to put your focus on advertising, right? It doesn't make sense for me to advertise my game in a place that's going to get me absolutely no applications at all. And so age, it's more of a trend setting, so you can see where it is that you should put your focus on looking for players for your type of game. But continuing on, I like to know about a bit about my players before I meet them, like if they have any preferred pronouns, what name do they want to go by? Real name is not necessary. You can go by anything. What is a Discord handle, so that I can contact them if they don't contact me first? And, you know, trying to get to know a little bit more about who they are, so that way before I meet with them, I can get a bit of a description, like, okay, I see they're into this, they're into that. So that way I have something to connect with them over, and I have something to very easily start the conversation to kind of get to know each other a bit better. And so that's all things that I include in my intake form, because the whole purpose of this, you know, especially the tell us about yourself, is that I am going to be meeting with this person in a video call or a voice call at some point in the future. And so, and I'll talk about the meeting aspect in a bit after I'm done talking about this. But the whole point of that is that I want to play, it's very important for me to play with people that I'm going to get along with, or to play with people that are very friendly, that are very sociable, very caring, and those are all very great things to have. And so I want to show and connect with these people as like, hey, you know, you and I have these things in common, or I think that's very cool that you have that, and then I can be supportive or have things to talk with these people about them, because I mean, I do care about people a lot, and so the more I can show, like, hey, you know, like, I see that you like this thing, maybe I might not be into it, but I heard or know this about this other person. Now I can connect them with someone else as friends. And I guess, you know, for me, that's just a natural thing. I like to be like the glue between people, being very friendly, providing a space for other people to meet through me, which I think is great. But I do put a lot of genuine effort to try to get to know people and what it is that matters to them, or small things that are going on in their lives, to the point that well, I know so many people, I've met so many people now that I've started writing things down, because it's very hard for me to remember hundreds of people's of details, but I try really hard. So continuing on, after the about them section, I have a section where I have all of my games. I currently don't have it active because I don't have any games currently that I'm looking for. But if I had 3 or 4 games throughout the week that have spots available, I put them in there. And so here I have things about every single one of my games that I have been looking for in the past. And I also have a section for unused listings, so I can very quickly drag them back and forth on the intake form. All as a way of like, hey, I know you're applying for this game, but if you're interested in this other game instead, then, you know, maybe this is something you might want to look at. And it does work. I have had people that were originally joining for one game, and they're like, hey, I like that game more. And I'm like, cool, yeah, you can join. I have free availability in both. You can join in one or the other, or both. So putting everything that you have all in one spot just makes it easier for them to things, and that's a win-win for everyone all around. So Continuing past what I have here for my intake, the next thing that I have is technology. So technology is one of the biggest barriers that I've had with players being able to join. I play online with Foundry, so players need a computer. They need to have a keyboard and a mouse. Also because we're going to be playing over voice and possibly video, a camera, a headset, and a microphone all become really necessary things. But if I'm going to be streaming, especially, then my requirements for quality are going to be a bit higher. And so I'm just very forward about it. Like, hey, these are the things that do work. These are the things that don't work. And so I put examples of things that do and don't work. Like here's one for microphones, right? Phones are not that great for microphones and headsets, especially if you're streaming, because there tends to be a lot of feedback. And so I just am very open. I'm like, hey, these are acceptable, these are not acceptable, and your requirements for your games are going to be very different than mine, especially if you're not a professional and you're not streaming, right? So you might have you might be okay with those things, in which case, by all means, state that you are okay with those things in your game. And this is the thing that I was talking about earlier, is that I have a playground or a place that players can test to see if their Foundry works on their computer. And so I have a playground here. I have instructions on how to log in, how to stress test your computer, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, I have a list of troubleshooting help and tips. If they still can't get it to work, then contact me and I'll help. And I have had the majority of the players that have contacted me have been okay with Foundry. There have been a significant portion that have not, for various reasons, and so that saves me a lot of time, saves them a lot of time, because the medium by which we could play is not possible for them. And so then I am not having to invest a lot of time in something that's just gonna fail from the get-go, and vice versa for them as well. So they might have to look for someone that plays on Roll20. I do try to make things as easy as possible for people, because I do like Foundry. It does tend to kind of exclude some people that don't have the computers for it, sadly, just naturally so. But definitely having a way for them to check it just to be sure is something that I include in my intake form. And then also anything like safety rules. For me, because I do it on the professional space, I do have like a term of service of agreement for Paladin's archives, moderation things for the Discord server. I put it all in one spot, and people can look at it, and it's very quick and easy. And so if I show you what I got here, it's got like a consent list, talks about conflict safety tools, a lot of these things that you could include in a session 0, but I also give it to them ahead of time through here, and I tend to be very consistent between all of my games, and so having one document for all of that tends to work out very great for everybody. And so that's something that I put there for people to look at. And at the very end, I have a section for, hey, like, if their form was rejected, I talk about, hey, these are the requirements, these are the things you need. If you just have I have had people that didn't have a mouse, and so I put links for a mouse that are very cheap on there. That's something that people have used. And at the very end, I thank you, right? And so the thing about intake forms is, sorry, without exposing everyone's information here, is that it does show you a lot of the trends. Like it'll say, hey, these are the age groups that have applied mostly for these games for this time. You can look at trends for answers. You also can have your answers be exported to a Google Sheets as well. And so it's very possible to filter information through a Google Sheets, and having that automated with scripting. That's very advanced stuff. I'm not going to go over that information necessarily right now, but it is possible to use that information in a way that can be very helpful to you, especially if you're trying to get very specific, nuanced information such as trends. And so, yeah. So all of that entire intake form is going to help you to filter in and out the players that naturally would or would not be able to join based on just hard limitations. And so if someone gets to your form and they're less than 18 years old, and it's going to give them the sorry, you're not old enough to play. And that's, hey, that's one less person that you'll have to talk with that automatically would be discounted due to your requirements. Or if their Foundry doesn't work on their computer, that's another one. But you tend to knock off a lot of these. You tend to knock off a lot of applications that are going to filter it down to the people that are going to be part of your game naturally. And so, and there's nothing wrong with that. You want to make sure to save as much time for yourself as much as them. Otherwise, you're investing hours to days and days of time and getting very little time back when you could have just automated a lot of that stuff to begin with. So those are intake forms. Now, meeting with players. Okay, so a large benefit to having the combination of intake form and meeting with people is that in the online space, especially if you're looking on Reddit or D&D Discord, is you're going to get a lot of people, as I've said earlier at the very beginning, that are a bit more inexperienced. That's okay. That are younger, and that's okay. But what I have seen more often than what I've seen very significantly is that there is a lot of initial hype, and then when the dopamine withers away, there tends to be ghosting. People become uncommunicative, and so what I do is that I put a little bit of friction between the intake form and the meeting with the player to ensure that this is a person that is very genuine, and also someone that I can play with, that is not just going to ghost or not show up to the first session. And so what I do is that when I plan to meet with someone, they turn in an intake form, it looks great, awesome, fantastic. I plan to meet with that person not in the same day. So I make a plan to meet with them a day or two later, or whenever I can in the next week for sure. Typically no later than 3 or 4 days, because then by that point they probably found another game and moved on. So and the reason that I don't meet with people in the same day is because I want to ensure that this person is someone that can keep track of their schedule and that they can show up to things on time. And so if I plan to meet with them a day later, it's like, hey, 3 p.m., I'll be here in this voice call, I'll be waiting. And then I'll typically get, a few different responses on it. But one of the bigger red flags is like, okay, great, contact me whenever you're ready. And so I'm like, I'm not going to contact you. Waiting to see if you are able to show up on your own without me having to chase you down. And that is one that I've seen come up frequently. And most of the time people show up. Some of the time people don't show up at all, in which case, that tells me a lot in and of itself. If they can even show up on time to a meeting to see if they can join a game. Also, a lot of people might not have read the LFG, and they might not realize like they were doing a voice and video call, and so they might be like, oh, it's video, oh, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. And it's like, okay, yeah, you didn't read the intake form, all right, you didn't read the LFG. Okay, well, if you're not comfortable with that, then I respect that, in which case, I kind of filtered out another application potentially there. But then the people that I do meet, that do end up showing up, that I do end up talking with, I don't talk a lot about D&D in and of itself. And so I think that one of the important things about meeting with people, especially players to get to know them, is you want it to be a very genuine conversation about who they are and what it is that they're interested in, talking about their day, talking about, you can't talk about D&D, talking about the things that you're excited about, their passions, things that they're working on as projects, things that they found challenging, how long they've been playing D&D. It's less an interview, it's more so a vibe check, to ensure like, hey, is this someone that I want to talk with? Is this someone that I want to play with? And I'll give examples of really, really great conversations that I had and conversations of really, really bad ones. So the really, really great conversations that I have are ones where we're both excited, we're both very friendly, we're sociable, there's a lot of laughs, a lot of smiles. I get to learn a lot about them and who it is that they are, how long have they been playing, what it is that they love. And it's just, it's great all around, right? And so we're asking questions about each other, we're talking about things that we like, and it's just a very natural flow of conversation. And those are the people that are your gold star people, the people that you're gonna communicate with best, because you're not having to pull teeth, you're not having to try very hard, and you're both vibing to that point where you are very easily being able to hold a conversation together and continue forward. D&D is a game where you have to talk with each other for several hours, so being able to hold a conversation and talk for just 5 to 10 minutes is almost like an essential skill whenever it comes to D&D. So that is an example of a really good conversation. And an example of things that have not been good that I've experienced. I have had people that it's like pulling teeth. I ask a question and they give a one-word answer. I'm like, hey, what are some of the things that you're really interested in D&D? Okay, like, what is it that you like about D&D? I like making characters. Okay, what kind of characters do you like to make? So it's whenever a lot of the burden is put on the DM and the other person is being very short, it might not be as good. And so I might, maybe they need a little bit of opening up, so maybe you continue the conversation a little bit further. Sometimes it gets better, most times it doesn't. So I'm like, okay, so this is someone that maybe is not going to be so good to put in a game because they're not communicating. All right, so that's something to look at. Other things that I've had is I've had people be very rude or abrasive as well. And so it's like, hey, like we're meeting in a call, it's like, hey, nice to meet you. My name is Paladin. Hope you're having a great day. And there's just the first thing that they come upon is asking a very forward question about something. Like I've had people ask like, hey, I didn't know that you were a professional game master. So like, for someone that's a professional game master, you're really smart. Fucking backhanded compliment right off from the get-go. I've heard that one once, and that was like, ooh, that's a bit rude. I don't think that this conversation is gonna go further from there. It didn't. So I've had people growl at me. I had one person growl at me because I didn't allow dragons in my world as a character option. They literally gird, and then I'm like, okay, yeah, I think this conversation is done. I've had people that were that had a lot of negative biases against. I have one person that had a lot of negative biases against the D&D community, and they just immediately start dumping about all the games that kicked them out, all of these things that they find wrong, and I'm like, it's just one negative thing after another, one negative thing after another. So I'm like, okay, I haven't even got a chance to introduce myself and they're already doing this. And so you'll learn a lot about people in the first meeting just by saying hello and introducing them yourself, and if they and how they respond back and how you talk and how the things they were putting a lot of focus in. And so it might take some time to kind of get used to filtering out like what it is that I'm comfortable with versus not comfortable with as a dungeon master. But it is an essential skill to kind of really be able to fill your game with great players that are going to be supportive and be a part of your world. I mean, these are people that you're going to be investing a lot of time into playing this game, and so it makes sense to invest a lot of time and energy into trying to find the right people to play this game with, because it could be an absolutely amazing experience with a great party of people that all get along with each other, but it can be an equally dreadful experience with a group of people that just don't care. And I would love to think that most people do care about playing and their time, but there's these nuances about people that make it very complicated and different. And so that, especially when it comes to like play style or biases or culture. And so I think getting to know people even just a little bit goes a very far and long way, because then you get to make a judgment of like, is this someone that I would definitely see myself investing 3 to 5 years of time with? Because sometimes games might go that long. And if the answer is no, then maybe it's not a good fit. And so something that I would definitely recommend before all of this is to get a piece of paper and write down all of the things that you definitely 100% do want in to see in someone that you're playing with. Hold on just a second. Dog's barking. All right. So all the things that you do want to see, or the things that you are looking for, and also write down a list of things that you absolutely will not be okay with. I don't want someone that's going to be disrespectful. I don't want someone that's going to be dismissive. I don't want someone that is going to be ghosting me and doing all these things, because these are the things that you're going to be looking for and not looking for. And so by the time I finish talking with this person, I can look at my list. I can say like, okay, like, did this person show any of these things versus that things? And if it's like, if they're showing like 75+% of the things on my yes list, then great. If there's anything on my absolutely do not list, I do not do it, even if it's just one, because those are the things that are just that I know are going to cause a lot of problems. Even if it's like 75% green, but there's one red, I always say no, because I value some things heavily. Like for example, on my list of things for red, I have that I don't want to be disrespected. And so if this person disrespected me during our conversation on our first meeting, then what does that mean for what they're going to do later on? They're probably going to disrespect me again. So and things that I have on my green side is like someone that I can carry a conversation with, someone that that is very sociable and presentable and, you know, polite, right? So those are things that are important for me, so I put those on my green list. And so definitely having these filters of how to navigate through relationships. I mean, because at the end of the day, it is a type of relationship. It's a friendship that you're making with someone for a long period of time. It's something that will save you a lot of time and heartache as well, so that, you know, the amount of time that you're putting into these games is a lot. And so you want to make sure that the people that you're sharing this game and experience with is someone that is going to value you putting this time in and energy, and that it's going to be almost like a lightning in a bottle situation for you and the people in your games. And so the LFG, the intake form, and the meeting with players are the three things that I do in order to kind of maximize those results. And it's effective. It's definitely very effective for me in trying to find the right people so I could play with, so I could give them all my attention, because I give players as much focus on as I can on things. So if that is helpful for you, great. I'm glad that it is. I'm going to take a short break so I can get something to drink, and I will be back in about a couple of minutes. So stay tuned, and then whenever we come back, I'll continue talking about the next topic, which is, let me see. The next topic is about technical and creative writing. So I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Stay tuned. Okay, hello everybody. I am back. Hope you guys are having a great and wonderful day. If you are just now tuning in, welcome to the stream. My name is Paladin, Paladin's Archives, and today has been it's been very great so far. Hopefully, everyone is having a fantastic Sunday wherever you are, whenever you are, at any part of the world. So, I was talking about how to make a great LFG post and giving some tips and tricks on how to improve your LFGs. And so the next thing that I'm going to talk about is going to be about technical and creative writing. Damn it, the music just got good, Paladin. Hello. So hopefully this is going to give you all a great boost to your games. Because technical and creative writing is one of the main driving vehicles that DMs have for their games overall. So, and so what I mean is that technical and creative writing is what we use in order to kind of plan out our worlds, our stories, our games. It is also the means by which we are able to categorize and create information in a way that is very well understood and read by others. It's one thing if we're making something for ourselves. It's another thing if we're making something for someone else to read and also to use. Hi, Grace. Good to see you. Hopefully you're having a great day today. Now, let's dive right into it. So what is technical writing? And so technical writing is that which is used for all the boring things. Creating manuals that are used for instructions, operation documents, memos, just things that are very formal, very cut and dry. It also can include things such as creating a book for D&D, and in which case you might have to like technically categorize your information or your writing in various different ways so that it makes sense to the reader what it is that they're looking at and in what order. But that's the writing that encompasses more for making someone for something else. And so one might think, okay, well, I'm never going to write a book or I'm not going to publish a book. Okay, fair. You might not have to get to that level of technical writing, but you probably will be doing things such as, well, creating an LFG post, which is technical writing. And so having the skills of being able to categorize information in various ways and being consistent in the format is going to help a lot. And so how would I better my skills with technical writing? That is something that can be a bit of a challenge, because in order to get better at something like that, you would need to have a process to be able to look at your writing and be able to see the inconsistencies in it. And so something that I do whenever I'm formatting is that I go through the entire document to make sure that all my headers are the same size, that are of the same kind, that I have my periods in the right places, that all my sentences are capitalized for the first letter of the sentence, that I have information put where it makes sense to put it, and that things are aligned and formatted consistently and are very neat throughout the whole thing. And that is something that I do throughout the whole writing process. And definitely something that has helped me as well is to look at examples of technical documents of the same kind. And so a good example of what I've done is I made an operations document for the Archives Adventures, and I formatted it to be very consistent and very concise, and it ended up being like 70 pages long, which is a really long document. And that would not have been possible if I had not had a lot of experience making easier things such as LFG documents, for example. And so a lot of the technical writing practice is going to come from just looking at your own work and looking at how to make it better, and having a editing and revision process so that when you finish the first rough draft or the first part of whatever it is you're making, you're able to go through it with a critical eye and going very slowly to make sure that similar things are in fact formatted the same, but also that the context of the information or the writing is also contextually similar. And so and that's something that'll take some time. I would definitely recommend having someone with more experience help with this part, because building technical writing skills can be very hard. And it's easier whenever there's someone else that can kind of guide you along with it, rather than trying to do it all on your own. So that's it for technical writing. Now for creative writing, this is going to be the main amount of skill that you're going to be putting a lot of time into. So what I mean is, we're literally writing TTRPG adventures that are based on creative thinking, and also formulating storylines and plots and connecting them together in a very effective way to tell the story the way that you want to tell it, right? So creative writing is like any other skill. The more that you practice it, the better you're going to get at it. And it's also a muscle. And so the more that you do it, the better it's going to come to you on how to creatively write. So where I would start is, whenever you start making your first world, your first story, it's to make something very small and simple. And if you had been following the series so far, and you would know that in our first, or even in our first 2 episodes, we created a whole world from scratch, and it was just completely just drop of the hat. We just made it together, right? So how can you start with even the simplest little part of that? And that's where I would get the Gary Gygax 75 challenge handbook, in order to kind of help guide you with what order you should make the things. But even just starting with one part of that, let's say that we're going to make a city, right? We're just going to make a city, just a plain and simple city. How would you start? So, or how would you know what it is that you got to write, and in what order, and how do you make it creative? So that is where inspiration really plays a really, really heavy hand. Whenever you're making your various worlds, settings, plots, whatever it might be, having a list of references or things that you're going to draw inspiration from to make whatever it is you're going to make is going to help a lot. Because whenever you get stuck, you want to have something to reference to. And so if you're making something completely from scratch without any references, you're going to have almost too many ideas in order to make the things you're trying to make. And so having a smaller list that's going to be a little bit more constraining and more defining of what it is you're trying to do is going to help a lot. And so that's somewhere that I would start. The second thing, whenever it comes to creative writing, is to try to write at the same time every day in the same spot, because that's going to help regulate your body and your mind to get used to the process of writing in and of itself. And so I tend to write, I tend to do everything here at this desk, but whenever I am feeling stuck, I actually go for a walk. And definitely taking breaks and going out in the sun is something that will help out a lot. But also getting inspiration from just picking books out of my walls and looking at things to get a different viewpoint or a different idea is something that also helped me as well. But I also will say that the thing that has helped me most as well, more than anything else, is understanding story structure. And so that is really where I'm wanting to start. So we're going to start with story structure. So what is story structure? So story structure is the means by which you are writing your story from the beginning to end, right? So at the beginning, we have like an intro, typically. And then there tends to be like an inciting event, which is something that happens that gets the story moving forward, right? And then so on and so on. And so there are different types of story structure out there. And the main one that I will say that tends to be most often used is, let me pull it up. I'm trying to find a link for this so that I can send it. I think I got it here. So a lot of the things that you're going to have is you're typically going to have a multiple part narrative. And so if you're looking at things like movies, they tend to have like a 3-act structure. And so the first act is going to set the stage for your story, right? So that's typically the means by which your your characters or your players are starting to get a foot into this world so they can understand what's in it. And they start to understand who the major factors are in this world and what it is that's going on. And typically in that first act, that's whenever you have your inciting event. So first act. And that's when you have your intro to the world. There we go. An inciting event. And then you're gonna have some sort of climax to the act as well. And so these are the things that are going to be a part of your act. And so to kind of explain each one a little further, the first act is going to be, again, the way in which your characters are going to be tossed towards the conflict or the problem that is occurring, and the players are going to be put along this line or this this journey to try to resolve something that has happened, right? And so that's where the inciting event is really important, is that there is something that is pulling these characters out of the comfort of their home and towards the path of trying to resolve this conflict. And so the climax to the first act is most likely going to be the big part of what it is that they are up against, that they're really shown the danger of what is out there. And it might be something that is most likely insurpassable at their level. Maybe they don't have enough information, maybe they don't have enough strength to get past whatever it is that they're up against. But whatever it is, it's something bigger than themselves they have to fight against, and they are stepping up to go towards that path. Most likely because there is some sort of personal connection they have on this, right? Like, especially if you're drawing in backstory, you're going to want to include the characters' personal lives in a way that really draws them in to go in that direction. Otherwise, they might not care. Like, why should I care about this event that happened? And so trying to add a lot of personal interest for what it is their characters are looking for and caring about is essential for this part of the story. So the second act then afterwards, let me do it like this. First act. There we go. Let me copy and paste. So we have our first act, our second act, and our third act. So the second act is going to be the confrontation that the characters are going to have with this thing. And so they are going out of their way to go towards the danger, and in doing so are going to have multiple points in which they're going to be having challenges. They're going to be looking, they're going to be interacting and getting closer to whatever this big evil or this big problem is that they're trying to encounter against. And so they're going to have obstacles. They're going to have to they're going to be constant challenges and obstacles. They are going to win some and lose some, and the losing some is exceptionally important. If the players are always winning, I might get a little bored. Having a challenge put up against them is essential, so that way you can maintain their interest. That way you can show that you have to, they still have room to grow. Now, on the opposite side, if they always lose, they're going to lose interest as well, because it's going to seem impossible. Everything that they do is always met with doom and destruction in this state, and they can't ever move forward in this world. And so they might just give up. They'll be like, hey, what's the point of doing this if I'm always going to lose? And so having that balance of wins and losses is it can be hard to a hard thing to do, especially if you're trying to go for a purposeful narrative where you are making them lose, but setting things up to be on the cusp of the limits of their capabilities is a balancing challenge that we'll talk about another day, but it is possible. So that way they can feel that the world is an uphill climb to get towards their goals, and they do have to put some effort into trying to overcome whatever this challenge might be. So that's a lot of what the second act is, that they're confronting the problem across various challenges multiple times. There's going to be multiple climaxes. There are going to be some subplots that the characters are going to go through in order to reach a conclusion, and then find out some more information, and then et cetera, just like a rinse and repeat. The third act is what's better known as the resolution of the story. Let me put these here. So the second act is confrontation, and the first act is the introduction and inciting event. And the third act is going to be whenever they have gone past these challenges and they've grown as characters. They have learned a lot about who they are, and they're ready to confront whatever it is that might be. And so the final act, what it does is that it brings a close to the story, and it brings a resolution to the conflict and ties up a lot of loose ends. And so there is a close to the story, resolution slash finality to the plot, and more, and also just as well there is there's a post climax event, or a finality of like, this is the result of what your actions have come up to now that you've defeated the Demon King. These are the things that happen. Can't see the typing on the screen. Oh, that's okay. I can switch it here. Thank you. Let's see. There we go. Boop. So there you go. Now you can see what I have on there. So the third act of the resolution is going to be the end of the story, and all of these three acts might actually just be one subplot. And so this can be one story. This also can be a story within a larger story. And so, for example, like you might have a first act with all of this in it. So let me do it like this. So you might have all of that put into one act, and then your second act is just a rinse and repeat of all of this information again. And so it really depends on how it is that how long you're wanting the story to be, how in depth you want your story to be, and what it is that you're trying to do. And so this first, second, and third act is a great way in order to kind of, at the very start, to have a systematic way to format your sessions, or to format your subplots or your sub-stories of what is a smaller part of a bigger story, which is really what D&D is to a sense. And so if you are making your campaign from the start, you probably have this big bad thing that the party is trying to get towards. But in order to get there, they have to get through the goblin mines. And so this first act is probably going to be about the goblin mines, right? Go. So now the goblin mines are going to have this first, second, and third act, where it has very little to do with this big bad guy, which let's say that the big bad guy is a lich that wants to take over the world. Let's just go very characteristic here. A lich that wants to take over the world. And so that is the thing. We want to prevent this lich from taking over the world, but to get there, we got to go through the goblin mines. So we go to the goblin mines, and the goblins, they have their own story that has nothing to do with the lich at all. And so it is. So we write our first, second, and third act. It could be something like, oh, we go to the goblin mines and we get attacked by goblins and they steal all our stuff. That is our first act. The inciting incident is that they took our things And so we have this scuffle between them, and they killed one of our party members. That's our climax of that first act, where they killed one of us, and now we're angry. We want to get our stuff back, and we're going to go after those goblins. And so we do. So we confront the goblins in the second act of the Goblin Mine. And so we go there, and we have the challenges and obstacles that they set up a lot of booby traps. We're having to Indiana Jones our way through these tunnels, having to get out of rolling rocks and a bunch of traps that were set up. And we might get hit by a couple of those things. We might escape a lot of those things. There's kind of like this back and forth struggle between us and the goblins, as they're maybe slowly getting us weaker and weaker, but we're also getting them weaker as well. And so there is this point where we're not really sure if we're going to get our stuff back or not, because there are so many of them and there's so few of us. And so how are we going to get past this? And so a lot of that second act is looking at that war of attrition and seeing an equally matched foe or a challenge that the players can barely feel like they get past again. So then they have to get creative at that point, right? And so that kind of brings us to the third act, where we find a way to get past them. Maybe we found an NPC that's willing to help us. Maybe we find a very crafty or very tricky solution that the rogue might go in and poison the well, and they all get poisoned. And so we go in to fight them while they're in their poisoned state. It makes the fight a lot easier. And so we find out that whenever we get to Act 3 and we defeat the goblins and are now fighting the Goblin King, that this all is related to the main story in some way, weirdly enough. That the goblins were put there by the Lich in order to prevent people from coming through and getting closer to where he is at. And so great, we find out some information that is going to lead us to the next part of where to go. And it's you're giving a bit of a cookie crumb sort of trail of where it is that the players have to go from here. And it's a very smart way to kind of integrate your smaller subplots into the bigger subplots by having those various structures or various subplots be related in some way, somehow. They also can be red herrings as well. And I would say that those are the ones that are a bit dangerous, because now you have introduced a possibility for the characters to completely derail the campaign and go off in this other adventure that has nothing to do with the main story at all. And so having some care in that, and there's some ways that you can prevent that from happening. And I would say that if you are going to make this entire quest a red herring, where like it's just a way for them to have fun on a side thing, where it's about the fun on the journey, not the destination, that there's a finality to it, or if there's a continuation to the Goblin Mines, if I made a Goblin Mines Part 2, that it doesn't go very far from there, and that it ends up being a dead end and it's done. Because what can happen is that you end up then with a story where it's completely not about what the original story was supposed to be about, and then your main story is gone. And so then this whole epic that you built up from the beginning is just deteriorates. So you want to be very careful when you're writing these subplots and these sub stories, that there is some sort of finality to them, but also that there is some connection to that and your main plot right here. Because the whole point of these subplots is that they are moving the game forward. They are making the characters stronger in some way or the other. I mean, like the most obvious way is that they're getting experience points and they're leveling up, right, with easier challenges. And in these various different stories that are connected to the story in some way, they are getting closer to their goal. And that is what's going to drive a lot of that interest, is that the creative writing aspect that is the most effective. And this kind of goes into dynamic storytelling. The ones that are the most effective are the ones that have a lot of vested personal interest to the player character's story, just as much as the main story itself. Like, so what I do with my player characters is, or with my players, is that I give them a character creation form, and I say, hey, create a backstory, and I'm gonna read it, and I tell them to make it as long as possible, given that there's some questions that are very specific on there for them to answer. And if Grace is still here, she knows very well, because she had to fill a couple of those several times, that they're very detailed in what it is that they ask. And that from that information, I'm able to cool and understand a lot about the player characters. And so not only is the DM having to creatively structure and connect together the world with these various different segments, trying to connect the player's character into this plot is going to strengthen the bond and connection that these players have with the game that you have, and it's going to excite them. Like, ooh, you know, like we'll take Grace's Ambrose character from Rappan Athuk. I read the backstory and I implemented into the game that, you know, there is this relationship of loss from mother and father, and now it's a main integral part of the game, where there is this colliding of family values and how that is relating to the bigger world overall, and the main aspect of there being a war that is uncommon. And so that is very cool, you know, to have that part integrated into the game, because now the character is personally invested in the outcome of, or the situation of there being a milk war in Rappan Athuk on Monday. And so that is one example of a way to integrate it. But then, you know, one might ask, okay, well, I have this, I make them make a backstory and I'm reading it through. So how do I know how to include what, when, where, and why? So what I'm going to show you is something called a character web. Let me pull it up. So this is something that I made, or that I make whenever I am writing really complex stories that are connected together. I put a lot of time to make sure that what I am making is of exceptional value. And this is something that I've said, I believe in the previous stream last week, is that the difference between good and great and good and exceptional is 100 to 1,000 times fold. And so if you want to make really good stories, you're gonna have to put a lot of time into it. And there's no shortcutting it. It really does take a lot of work, both on the player and the DM side. And whenever you realize how much time it takes to make one really great story, you realize that you really can't make that many great adventures, because the amount of effort it takes is immense. And so definitely give yourself a lot of space and a lot of time to sit down and ensure that the things that you're making, especially if you are plot webbing, that you're giving yourself enough room to connect these things together. So what is plot webbing? So plot webbing is whenever I take the player character's backstory and I'm reading the details of the player character's backstory, and I'm putting them down onto a board. It could be a paper. It's easier on Miro board. And I'm connecting them together with the rest of the details of the story. And so I will show an example for Gib. Gib is our goblin. And so Gib has goals. What are his goals? He wants to find an apprentice. He wants to be accepted. And he wants to save Grisnek from an undead menace. And so anything that has to relate with any three of these things, I connect them to other points that I found in the story. So let's take that Gib wants to save Grisnek from an undead menace. And so I am following my subplot that I made here, and it's connected to the Goblin City of Grisnek. Well, in the Goblin City of Grisnek, there are all these other things. There is a Kegzig Carnal Edifice, which is a person. That is a teacher that taught as, which is one of the NPCs. They also, let's see if I'm following this, are an ally and friend of Gib. All right. It looks very convoluted because there's just so many things in that backstory that I had to connect. But there's also this whole history of things that I had to connect together. For example, there is a city witch doctor that forced Gib to be a witch doctor and to be subservient, or else Gib would be killed. Okay, and then also that the previous witch doctor that was supposed to teach Gib had died. His name was lost, and his name was too taboo. All right, well, apparently this previous witch doctor had a relationship to the clan chief, who was killed by another person, who was killed by someone unknown. And so then you start to see that there's this history of events, and I can very easily pull and connect these things. Yeah, the dwarves. I can very easily connect these things to other parts of the story, especially when they are things that other player characters have in common. And that is where a lot of the importance of this comes along. Because whenever I fully write out and I web out all the details of one character's story, and then I do it again to another character, in this case, Ambrose, I now have created two entirely different webs with all of these details that I can then use to find a way to connect them together with someone else. And the reason why that is so important is because I want to try to find an opportunity, create a story that I can get two player characters and have them bond over something they both share, right? Like Ambrose has a history of rejection from family. Gib also has a history of rejection from family. So me making a story that has to do with rejection of family is something that's going to drive both characters and their interests together towards this thing. And then naturally they're going to bond and have something to talk over, and they might talk about their backstories, or at least be much more likely to do that. And it worked. So and I did that with Rappan Athuk, and it is something that they ended up naturally going through. And so these are the things that do take a lot of time, but do give you a good focal point on what kind of stories to make. And so let me take Gib and Ambrose as a good example, and let's go back to the story that we wrote, right? Goblin Mines. So if I was to make a Goblin Mine story and have it be relative to what it is that my player characters are experiencing in their backstory, well, then I'm going to change this up. I'm going to make this a goblin story where the goblins are forced to, against their will, to attack the party members, and that they are having to face rejection from the other goblins in the world because they have agreed to take upon this job from the Lich King. And the goblins hate the Lich King, but because they decided to side with evil, now the goblins have a schism in between themselves, where some of the goblins are attacking the party members and the other half are maybe helping the party members. And the party has a really hard middle line now, where they have to decide if they're going to kill the goblins, or are they going to let them live and try to find a way to free them from their imprisonment of working for someone. And that makes for a very, very zesty plotline, as opposed to just a traditional plotline that I had before, where the goblins were just attacking because they're there and maybe they know something about the Lich King. But now I've included the backstory of hey, there's family and there's confrontation and they don't want to do this, and there might be loss and rejection. And so now that will tie in the interest of both Gib and Ambrose to what is going on here, and also have a lot of empathy as well. And they, as a result, might actually end up bringing the goblins along, and that might be really cool, because everyone likes having party pets and party allies. And so the whole point that I'm getting at here is that there are ways for you as a dungeon master to make an extremely great story that is based on the stories that are given to you by your player characters. And that takes time and effort. And having structure helps. So having a first, second, and third act structure is what I would recommend for any dungeon master to start off, because it's simple and it's easy. And there are tons of resources online that you can use to kind of format your story bit by bit. So that'd be the first part. And the second part is to have your player characters give you a backstory, preferably give them some guidelines on what to fill out. Give them a document, be like, hey, fill all these questions out, and then give it to me. And you take that and you make a story plot, or you make a plot web like this, and try to find opportunities and similarities between all of your player characters, so that way you can create stories that are going to be vested interest for them. Not only that, but your player characters, your players are going to come up with a lot of details and a lot of things that you can use to make stories from. So that's actually less thinking on your part. Story hooks, please, please give me all the story hooks that you can, so that way I can create something that's going to make sense for them. And it's also a lot less likely that they're going to ignore it or not care about it, right? So these are the things that are going to help enhance your creative writing, but also give your players a lot of care of what is going on in the world, because they're more included in the things that are happening. So there you go. So that's how you make a dynamic story, is that you have to make something that is very relative to the player characters in some way. But in and of itself, you also have to make the story, as a result, change the world in some way towards the goal that you're trying to go for. So if the goal is like, hey, I'm trying to get rid of this Lich King, then trying to set up the story or the path towards that way be a little bit more natural. It just makes sense. So this kind of goes back to like, make sure that if you are intending to have just a completely irrelevant side quest, that you try to find a way to just cut it off at the end, so that way that you don't continue on forever on this path that never goes back towards the Lich King, or towards defeating the Lich. Ooh, okay. So that is a lot of information that I've just thrown out on technical and creative writing. And so what I would suggest is start small, start slow, and definitely one-shots. I would start with writing one-shots and then writing small adventures, and then go on to writing a great epic. If you do want to make a great epic, give yourself a lot of room and a lot of space. You're gonna have to write a lot. You're gonna have to plan a lot, so that way you can reach the conclusion that you're wanting to reach, or towards that goal. And also bringing your player characters along through that entire journey is a challenge. And it's already difficult enough to hold the table together for more than 3 to 6 months to a year, but also trying to have them and bring them along in the story and continue caring about the story can also be a challenge as well. And so it's easier with smaller adventures first, and then you can make an epic with more experience. And so I would start with one-shots, small adventures, and then go towards the epic route if you want to. Or if you really do want to start the epic from the beginning, then my recommendation is to have a big general layout of what you want the journey to be like. Get your player characters' plot stories, and then start to put in major elements of the 3-part structure, and then breaking out that 3-part structure over and over and over again until you have this massive skeleton that almost looks like a snake with the way that it's formatted out. And then start filling in details, and start from the beginning. Start a little bit from the beginning, and definitely know how you want it to end. If you know how you want it to end, you want it to end at the shadow plane, and you want it to have this massive war, then you have to have a way to work to get there and work backwards all the way to the beginning. And that could be a challenge. And so that's why I don't suggest making epics from the beginning, but if you can and your brain has that capability, or you already have some experience, then go for it. You do it. Like, definitely throw it out there and show the world, and and do the best that you can, and just trial and error, rinse and repeat, improve on your skills, and then over time you'll realize that there are certain things that work well some ways, and certain things that don't work well other ways, and that's where wisdom and experience come into play. And yeah, so that's how we learn, and that's how we get better at writing, is that you have to strengthen the muscle by trying, and maybe failing sometimes, succeeding sometimes, and going from there. All right, so let's talk about the last part, which is how to make memorable NPCs, and then I'm going to be done. At least with talking about things, and then we could talk about anything that we want. So how do you make a memorable NPC, and what does that mean? So something to note here is that we're talking about making a memorable NPC in relation to the party members remembering them or really loving them. And so I think that some of us can probably relate to there being the cliche like goblin named Boblin, and maybe this made all this effort into creating this world and all these things, and Boblin is the thing that they gravitate to the most because he's simple and quirky and cute. It is the thing that the players like a lot. And so tune into those things. And so like you'll see that every group likes something specific, or something that they like in themselves a lot when it comes to the story, to the characters, to the things that they like, to the things that they don't like. You might realize that some, like groups really like having a party mascot, such as a large spider. There are two groups that I have had that have really loved a large spider companion. The first one was named Shrimp. That was from the World Record Marathon #1, and the second one was named Ass. He was from the Baldur's Gate 3 series that I had on Archives Adventures not long ago. And some of us really don't like spiders, but they loved the spider aspect of it and thought it was really cute. I've had groups that really liked things like the pet salamanders, such as the Roog that we have in the playtests. I've had groups that have connected onto really weird and unusual creatures, such as I had someone have a pet beholder. I think I have a player right now that has a bag filled with 8,000 chickens. Don't ask. There is also a group that I had that really attached onto a zombie. You're like, okay, a zombie. Like, yeah, a zombie. So, these are the things that players are just gonna find in your world, and they're gonna latch onto it. And then we might ask ourselves, well, how is it that that happens? What is it about these characters or these NPCs or monsters that people tend to really attach to? And I've noticed some patterns when it comes to these things. So I think that the one factor that connects all of these different NPCs and monsters together of what people attach to is that there's something about them that's quirky or unique or different, or they're found in a place that is just unusual, or maybe they're really relatable. And so for example, with the zombie was a dead party member, and they really loved having this person around, and so they kept them around as a form of reference. Very morbid, very very macabre, and so maybe that's one thing that worked for them. Another one that's maybe a lot more relative is with Ass and Shrimp. They both were very loving spiders, and they helped the party, and they were very cute in their mannerisms, and they acted in a way that was just very characteristic. Ass, what I did with him, the spider, is that I made him very anxious, and every time that he did something wrong, he would web on something or web on accident. And he also really had a niche for, yeah, you love Ass, I see. He really had a niche for eating people, especially dead people. He's like, oh great, look, we killed this bandit. Immediately starts eating it. And so the fact that the players were having to baby him and treat him like a toddler, like, no, you can't do that, is what I think really drove a lot of that interest. It was just this thing that they had to relate to, and he would get sad, and he was never aggressive towards them, but he was just very cute. He also had a lot of other things, such as guns, and he likes the milk sound. Yes, he loves the milk sound. That made him have a personality. And so all of that to come together to say is that having an NPC that has a very unique personality that's very quirky is something that people will attach to a lot, right? And so, for example, having a kobold, that's it. It's just a kobold. Maybe not that great. But what about a kobold that tends to cower every single time there's a loud noise, and whenever he does, he like accidentally expels a little bit of fire? That seems a little bit more of a quirky thing that people might attach to. Or what about a kobold that is really interested in creating potted plants? He makes the pots out of clay, and he puts dirt in it, and then he puts a seed, and he grows the plant, and he gives it away to someone because he just likes giving away flowers to people. That's also a really cool thing. We're really good quirk. But the whole point that I'm trying to get at is that there's something about this character that gives him personality. I want the potted plant obsessed kobold. I'm sure that you do. But there's something about these NPCs or these characters that are just really cute, or really something that puts levity in the lives of characters that are in a world where everything is full of darkness, right? And so adding that little bit of light in the small moments of the interaction are what are going to define a lot of these things that people remember. People aren't gonna people might remember that fight they had with that second or third round of goblins in the goblin cave. Maybe they will, but only maybe if there was just some sort of big event, like maybe someone died. But if it's just another fight, are they really gonna remember it? Maybe not as much. But are they going to remember the time when they found a beholder, and that beholder was pink, and that beholder was in love with another beholder, and they had just like these little cute quirks about them? I think that's a little bit more memorable because it's very unique, and it's just a one-time thing. But they also might remember beholder love. Yes, they also might remember the time where they were in the city and they were trying to get back some money that was stolen from them by going through the sewers, and their large spider had already got all of the money because they crit on their stealth check and had webbed all of the people that were there, killed them, and brought the money out before they even had a chance to bat an eye. That's memorable. Very specific to actually happen while there's Gate Pre. But it's when it comes to a story, it often is the journey with the small little bits of hope and levity and happiness that we end up remembering a lot more and putting a lot more meaning into. And so having NPCs that create those kind of situations really add a lot of depth and a lot of good vibes and love into the world and those situations. They might remember Odysseus the elephant and Puddles to otter stealing from the in Indigo Isles. We had this elephant and otter. They had a thing for stealing, and they stole from the king and queen and jumped out the window and ran away with all the money. And so those are things that are they're quirky, and they're memorable. And as you can see, these are things that we're like, oh yeah, remember that time that we stole from the king and queen, or that they stole from the king and queen. We probably don't even remember what it is that we were there for, but we will remember the elephant stealing from the king and queen. Very funny, very quirky. And so this is how you create memorable NPCs, by making memorable moments that are very contrasted to the darkness of what's going on. And removing some monotony from the world by having something on the side that is just very different. That's all I got. So this is the end of talking for, how long have I been talking? Started at 11, it's now about to be 2. So 1200, so it's about 3 hours. So that's all I got for today for the hard skills part 1 of story crafting, and how to increase your skills on making a better story and also making a memorable NPCs, tips on technical and creative writing, and how to make a really good LFG post. It's a lot of talking and my mouth feels very dry, but I'm glad that I get to share a lot of this information with you all. Next week, whenever I come back to talk and continue this series, it's going to be a lot about communication. Let's see, so I got in here the GM's natural role as a leader and the responsibility as a leader. Let's see, it's a lot of different skills that regard how to communicate better. And so how to think before talking, reasons to stay quiet and listen to others, knowing whenever it is our turn to speak, what to say, reading the room, self-awareness, and also how to reform ourselves socially if we might maybe not be the best social butterflies out there. But there are ways to kind of keep some things in mind to kind of keep yourself going forward and build these skills so that you could be a very effective communicator. I think that the more effective and the more concise and precise we are with our language, the better it is that people understand us and we are able to communicate our message to others, which is a very valuable skill that will carry you very far in life, not only in D&D, but in anything. So that is all I got. If anyone has anything they want to talk about, maybe their games, any questions that they have about D&D or their tables, more than welcome to ask them now. As I am here, ask me anything that you like, and I will answer in kind. So if not, then I will end with a raid. Let me get myself set up here. I have a question, Mr. Paladin, sir. How dare you give Ambrose trauma / joking? You know, I dare because yes. Oh man. Well, and you know, I guess I could talk about trauma and how to put in events that can be traumatic. That could be a very hard skill. And so before I even dare try to put anything that has to relate with very touchy psychological situations, or putting up things that can be a little bit more on the gory side, or that do involve really hard and harsh topics, it's important to know that you're okay with that. Having that session 0 and understanding that, hey, you know, is it okay that we might have potential genocide in this game? Is it okay that there might be potential racism in this game? You know, having that session 0 and having a good understanding of what's okay, not okay, is good. Being able to have a space where your players can communicate when they're uncomfortable with something, and then moving on from it. Having great communication between the GM and the players is exceptionally important. That's a lot what we're going to talk about next week, especially. But that is a skill that does start with the expectations of the game that the GM puts forth as a natural leader of the game. So, and whenever these questionable situations do come up, being able to tune in and listen and pay attention to the way that the players are interacting with each other. Maybe there's a player that normally interacts a lot and then they get really quiet, so they're like, okay, well, what does that mean? And that's when a lot of that critical conversation kind of comes in, to be like, hey, I noticed this, you know, I just want to make sure everything is okay, because I'm concerned about, you know, if maybe I did something bad, or like, just want to make sure that you're having a good time. And so that's stuff that could come up, and it has to be, the dungeon master has to be very comfortable in being able to bring up those topics with their players in a way that is to solve the problem of going forward together without the group falling apart, or without the player feeling like they've been disrespected, or that this group might not be for them. And so definitely some people are a little avoidant in trying to talk about these problems, and so trying to tune into what someone might be feeling without them saying anything can be a hard skill. But you know, that's where a lot of the trust building starts to come in, especially if it's a player that you've never played with before, to make sure that you have a history and a reputation that is good, so that people can trust and know that you are someone that can be talked with about these various things that come up. And for some people that can be hard, and it just takes practice and understanding and knowing yourself, and getting past some of these barriers that maybe some people have. Maybe they don't know how to have a critical conversation. So it's like, okay, well, then I have to go and learn how to do that. And I have to find the resource for that. Because if I don't, then I'm just going to be shooting myself in the foot over and over again until I do. Anyway, that led me down a whole other conversation of topics that really I'm going to save for next week. But it was a good segue. Thank you, Grace. I appreciate that a lot. If anyone else wants to ask anything? Oh, cows. Thank you. Does anyone else want to ask anything? How about, do you guys have anything in your games that maybe you are really excited about? Or is there something that maybe you are having a little bit of struggle with that you really want to ask and see what my viewpoint on it is? Or maybe if you want a little bit of insight or advice on a particular situation, more than likely to ask. Otherwise, I will end with a raid, and I hope that you guys do have a wonderful day for the rest of our Sunday here. So let's see. Who is online? All right. We're gonna do a raid towards Should It Be Dice. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you guys later. Adios.